he could not walk. In a world where physical strength was everything, where a warrior's worth was measured in how hard he could swing an axe and how fast he could run toward a shield wall, Ivar the Boneless could not do either. He was carried into battle on a great shield by his warriors. And from that shield, he built the largest Viking empire of his generation, conquered half of England, destroyed kingdoms that had stood for centuries, and became the most feared military mind in the Norse world. This is the story of the man who proved that the most dangerous weapon in any battle is never the one in your hand. It is the one between your ears. The Viking Age produced extraordinary men. Raiders who crossed the Atlantic. Traders who reached Baghdad. Warriors who served Byzantine emperors. But among all of them, Ivar the Boneless stands apart, not because he was the strongest or the most fearless, but because he was the most intelligent. He turned his physical limitation into a strategic asset, his inability to fight personally into a relentless focus on tactics, psychology, and the kind of cold calculation that made ordinary commanders look like children playing at war. This is the story of a man born into the most famous warrior family in the Viking world, the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, who carved his own legend entirely separate from his father's. A man who turned his father's death into the greatest military campaign of the 9th century. A conqueror who never swung a sword in personal combat and never needed to. Ivar the Boneless. And the proof that history belongs not to the strongest, but to the one who thinks longest. Ivar was born the son of Ragnar Lothbrok, the most famous Viking of his age, and a Slag, a Volva prophetess who the sagas say warned Ragnar to wait before consummating their marriage or their son would be born boneless. Ragnar, impatient, did not wait. Whether myth or medicine, Ivar was born with a condition that left his legs without the bone structure to support walking. In any other family, in any other age, this would have ended his story before it began. In the family of Ragnar Lothbrok, it did no such thing. What Ragnar did for Ivar was extraordinary. Instead of hiding his son's condition or treating it as a disgrace, Ragnar educated him differently. While his brothers learned to fight, Ivar learned to think. He studied every battle his father fought. He asked questions about strategy that his brothers never thought to ask. Why attack there and not here? What happens if the enemy does this? How do you move an army faster than the enemy expects? He absorbed everything. And he had the kind of mind that never forgot anything it had learned. His brothers were formidable. Bjorn Ironside, physically the most powerful warrior of the family. Fitzurk, Sigurd Snake in the Eye, each one a proven fighter. Ivar watched them train and understood something that none of them fully grasped. Individual warriors win fights. Commanders win wars. His brothers could beat any man in single combat. Ivar intended to beat entire kingdoms. The difference between those ambitions was everything. What exactly was Ivar's condition? The sagas use the Old Norse term beinlos, boneless, and historians have proposed many explanations. Some suggest brittle bone disease, which would explain both the condition and his extraordinary upper body strength from careful movement. Others propose a form of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which causes hypermobile joints that can appear boneless. Others argue the name was metaphorical, that beinlos referred to impotence or lack of fighting spirit, and was therefore deeply ironic given who Ivar became. The mystery remains unsolved. The man remains undeniable. What his condition gave him, beyond the physical limitations that are undeniable, was focus. While other Viking commanders spent their energy on personal glory, on individual combat, on the intoxicating violence of the shield wall, Ivar could not. He had to win differently. He had to win through planning, through intelligence, through the manipulation of terrain and timing and psychology. He had to be right before the battle started, because he could not improvise his way through it once it began. This constraint made him the finest strategic mind of the Viking Age. He built an intelligence network that the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms could not match. Before any campaign, Ivar knew the terrain. He knew which rivers could be navigated and which could not. He knew where the English food stores were, which roads the English armies would use, which alliances between English kings were solid and which were fragile. He gathered information the way other commanders gathered warriors, systematically, relentlessly, understanding that in war, knowing more than your enemy is worth 10,000 swords. When the news arrived that Ragnar Lothbrok had been thrown into a pit of venomous snakes by King El of Northumbria and had died there, the sons of Ragnar reacted in different ways. His brothers wept. They raged. They swore oaths and beat their fists against the walls of the longhouse. Ivar did none of these things. He sat very still. And he began to plan. The plan Ivar conceived was not a raid. It was a conquest. He understood, with the cold strategic clarity that was his defining gift, that throwing a Viking raiding party at Northumbria would accomplish nothing. El would simply wait behind his walls. No. What was needed was an army so large that no English king could ignore it, moving so fast that no English alliance could form against it, with objectives so clear that every blow landed in exactly the right place. He needed the Great Heathen army. And he needed every brother, every jarl, every warrior who had ever sailed under his father's banner. He spent 2 years building it. The recruitment of the Great Heathen army was itself a masterpiece of political organization. Ivar could not simply command, he was not yet a king. He had to persuade. He traveled between Norse halls, carried on his shield, making the argument that England was not just a target for revenge but a prize for settlement. Not just El's head, though that too, but land, wealth, permanent stakes in the richest island in the known world. He made the argument brilliantly. By 865 AD, the largest Viking force ever assembled was ready to sail. In 865 AD, the Great Heathen army landed in East Anglia. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, written by English monks who witnessed its consequences, called it simply the Great Heathen Army, and the name tells you everything about the terror it inspired. This was not seasonal raiding. This was not silver and home. This was a force that had come to stay. Ivar's first move was characteristically intelligent. He negotiated a peace with the East Anglian king, who provided horses. Ivar had just acquired the mobility to strike anywhere in England. With horses under his army, Ivar moved north toward Northumbria with a speed that shocked the English. Medieval armies moved slowly. Ivar's moved fast. He reached York, the great city of the north, one of the wealthiest in England, before Northumbria's feuding kings could put aside their own civil war long enough to defend it. On November 1, 866 AD, All Saints' Day, when the garrison would be in church, Ivar struck. York fell in hours. The capture of York was a strategic masterstroke. York, the Romans had called it Eboracum, the greatest city in northern Britain, was the administrative and military center of Northumbria. Taking it meant taking the kingdom. It also meant Ivar now had walls, food stores, and a defensible base from which to operate. He had turned England's greatest northern city into his headquarters. The campaign was 3 months old and already the most successful Viking operation in history. The fall of York finally ended the Northumbrian Civil War. King El, the man who had killed Ragnar Lothbrok, and his rival King Osbert put aside their conflict and united their forces to retake the city. In March 867 AD they attacked York with everything they had. Ivar let them breach the walls. Then he destroyed them. The Battle of York in 867 AD was one of the most complete military victories of the Viking Age. Ivar had allowed the English to believe they were retaking a weakly defended city. Instead, they walked into a trap prepared with surgical precision, Norse warriors positioned at every turn, every street a killing ground, every breach a death trap. Both English kings were killed. Northumbria's military power was broken in a single afternoon. And King El was taken alive. King El stood before Ivar the Boneless. The man who had thrown Ragnar Lothbrok into a pit of snakes now faced the son who had promised to come. Ivar did not rage. He did not make speeches. He was cold and precise, as he was in everything. The Norse sources describe El's execution with evident satisfaction, the blood eagle, a ritual death of maximum suffering, performed as deliberate vengeance for Ragnar's death. Whether historically accurate in every detail or not, the message was undeniable. Ragnar's sons had come. Ragnar's sons had won. The debt was paid. With Northumbria conquered and its king dead, Ivar moved south. He was not finished. Northumbria was one of 4 major Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. There was also East Anglia, Mercia, and Wessex. Each was wealthy. Each was a prize. Ivar intended to take them all, or enough of them to make England Norse permanently. He spent the next 2 years systematically dismantling the English political order with a methodical precision that no previous Viking had attempted. Mercia was the largest and most powerful of the English kingdoms. Its king Burgred, facing the full force of the Great Heathen army, chose payment over resistance, buying peace with silver and land concessions. East Anglia's King Edmund refused to submit and was killed, later venerated as a Christian martyr, his execution becoming one of the most famous acts of the Viking conquest. Kingdom after kingdom bent to Ivar's campaign. The England that Alfred the Great's father had known was disappearing. What made Ivar's campaign different from every previous Viking operation was its permanence. He was not raiding. He was governing. He established Norse law in the territories he controlled. He appointed administrators. He managed trade. He maintained order, brutal order, Norse order, but order nonetheless. The Danelaw he was creating was not a Viking camp. It was a new civilization being laid over an old one. England was being remade, and Ivar was the architect. While his brothers continued the campaign in England, Ivar turned his attention west, to Ireland. The Norse had been raiding Ireland for decades and had established a trading settlement at Dublin. Ivar arrived in Ireland around 870 AD and proceeded to transform Dublin from a trading post into a kingdom. He became, in Irish sources, Emar, the king of the Norsemen of all Ireland and Britain, a title that captured the scale of what he was building. In 870 AD, Ivar and his brother Olaf the White laid siege to Dumbarton Rock, the fortress capital of the Kingdom of Strathclyde, one of the most naturally defended positions in Britain, a great volcanic rock rising from the Firth of Clyde. The siege lasted 4 months. It was the longest Viking siege ever recorded. When the garrison finally ran out of water and surrendered, Ivar took 200 ships worth of captives back to Dublin, slaves, wealth, and the complete destruction of one of the oldest kingdoms in the British Isles. Under Ivar, Dublin became the most important Norse city outside Scandinavia. It was the hub of the Viking trading network in the Irish Sea, connecting Norway and Denmark to Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England through a web of commerce that made its rulers extraordinarily wealthy. Ivar had done in Ireland what he had done in England, turned raiding into governance, turned conquest into administration. He was not just a destroyer. He was a builder of systems. What made Ivar the greatest military mind of the Viking Age? It was the combination of things no single Viking commander had ever brought together before. The strategic vision to see not just the next battle but the entire campaign. The intelligence network to know what he was walking into before he arrived. The psychological insight to understand that terror was a weapon, used correctly, it won battles before they were fought. And the absolute control over his ego that allowed him to win without needing the personal glory of combat. He understood psychological warfare with a sophistication that would not be systematically theorized for another 1,000 years. His reputation was a weapon he maintained deliberately. The execution of King El was not just revenge, it was a message to every other English king about what awaited those who resisted. The fall of York was not just a conquest, it was a demonstration of how completely and suddenly Ivar could destroy a kingdom. He made surrender feel rational. And rational surrender was easier to administer than bloody conquest. His shield was not a symbol of weakness. It was his command post. Carried above the level of the fighting, he could see the entire battlefield while his brothers and commanders were in the thick of it. He saw the gaps forming before they were exploited. He saw the flanks weakening before they broke. He sent messengers with precise instructions, move here, hold there, advance now, and because his warriors trusted his judgment absolutely, they obeyed. He was the eyes of the army. His brothers were its fists. Together they were unbeatable. At the height of his power, Ivar the Boneless controlled, directly or through influence, the Danelaw in England, the Norse kingdom of Dublin, and Norse settlements and tributary relationships across Scotland and Wales. He was, as the Irish annals called him, the king of the Norsemen of all Ireland and Britain. No Viking before him had ever achieved political dominance across the British Isles on this scale. And he had done it from a shield. The Danelaw was not simply a conquered territory. It was a functioning civilization. Jorvik, Norse York, became one of the greatest trading cities in Northern Europe, connected by sea routes to Scandinavia, the Mediterranean, and the Islamic world. Norse law, Norse language, Norse administration ran alongside English institutions. The two cultures interpenetrated. Norse words entered English permanently. Norse legal concepts shaped English common law. A conquered people and a conquering people began, slowly, to become one. The one English kingdom that Ivar never fully broke was Wessex, ruled by the extraordinary Alfred, later called the Great. Alfred was everything Ivar respected in an enemy, intelligent, patient, and unwilling to accept defeat as final. Ivar was in Ireland by the time Alfred began his most effective resistance. The brothers he left behind were formidable warriors. They were not Ivar. Alfred held Wessex. And from Wessex, his descendants would eventually reclaim England. But that story was for the future. In the present, Ivar had built something the British Isles had never seen before. Ivar ruled Dublin and maintained his influence across the British Isles through the late 860s and into the 870s. The Irish annals track him with a respect bordering on awe. Every entry about him describes a man fully in command, fully deliberate, never reactive. He did not make impulsive decisions. He did not let emotion override strategy. He was the same at 50 as he had been at 30, cold, precise, and right. His governance of Dublin set the template for Norse rule in Ireland that would persist for generations. He balanced the interests of Norse settlers and the Irish kingdoms around them with a pragmatism that was entirely characteristic. He did not try to destroy Irish culture or convert it. He taxed it, traded with it, and occasionally warred with it, but he understood that a stable Ireland was more valuable than a destroyed one. His empire would survive him because he had built it on systems, not just on his personal authority. Ivar the Boneless died in 873 AD. The Irish annals recorded his death with the words, Imar, king of the Norsemen of all Ireland and Britain, ended his life. Not killed in battle. Not executed by an enemy. He died, as far as the records indicate, of illness, extraordinary for a Viking commander of his era and campaigns. He had survived everything the British Isles and Ireland could throw at him. In the end, only his own body defeated him. As it always had. As it had never stopped him. Dublin exists because of Ivar the Boneless. The city he transformed from a trading post into a kingdom became Ireland's capital and largest city, a position it has held ever since. The Norse street patterns, the Norse place names, the Norse trading networks he established shaped Dublin's development for centuries. Every time someone says the word Dublin, from the Norse Dublin, meaning black pool, they are speaking a word that traces directly to the civilization Ivar built. The Danelaw he established in England permanently shaped the country's language, law, and culture. The Norse legal tradition he imposed, the thing, the concept of individual rights before a court, the practice of settling disputes through law rather than purely through lordly decree, fed into the development of English common law. The Magna Carta, signed 3 centuries after Ivar's death, contained ideas that had Norse roots. His conquest shaped constitutional history in ways he could never have imagined. Modern genetics tells the rest of the story. Scandinavian DNA is concentrated precisely in the territories Ivar and the Great Heathen army conquered, northern and eastern England, and the east coast of Ireland. Millions of people living in these regions today carry the genetic legacy of the Viking settlement that Ivar made permanent. He could not walk. He left his mark on the bodies of millions of people who came after him. The most enduring conquest in Viking history, achieved from a shield. The sagas that preserved Ivar's story understood what made him extraordinary. Not his ferocity, his brothers were equally ferocious. Not his courage, every Viking raider had courage. What the sagas understood was the quality that set him apart from every commander of his age, the absolute supremacy of his mind over every obstacle, including his own body. He could not walk. He built empires. He could not fight. He won every battle. He could not move under his own power. He moved kingdoms. Alfred the Great, the only English king who successfully resisted Ivar's brothers, who spent his life pushing back against the Danelaw, had this to say about the Vikings who had conquered half his country. He did not dismiss them. He studied them. He translated their books. He understood that what had happened to England was not simply destruction. It was transformation. The England Alfred fought to preserve was already different from the England that had existed before the Great Heathen army landed. Ivar had changed it permanently. Alfred was right to take him seriously. Ivar the Boneless. The son who turned his father's death into the greatest military campaign of the 9th century. The commander who could not walk and conquered the British Isles. The man who proved that the body is a tool and the mind is the weapon, and that the right mind, wielded without mercy or sentiment, can move the world. He was carried everywhere he went. And everywhere he went, he left history behind him.